All right. Hello, everyone. It is Wednesday. It is 4:30 p.m. Central Time, and welcome to the office hours here on the Academy. This is where you can learn about updates on Intune, ConfigMgr, MDT, deployment, Windows 11, and much more. And of course, also a chance to ask questions on these topics. And I'm Johan, Andrew's Andrew, and we will start this show about right now. All right. Hey, Andrew, how are you?
I am doing well. Still trying to rest up a little bit from yesterday, but I'm doing well. How about yourself?
So, same. That was it was hard going up at 5 this morning when I had my first customer meeting. It was like, oh, this is painful.
I believe it. Well, I'm glad you've made it through the day so far.
Thank you very much. And for those of you tuning in from other parts of the world and the US, 4th of July over here is a pretty big deal. Pretty much everyone is taking a break from work, and or most folks at least, they don't absolutely have to work, does it? So that's what we were spending our yesterday with.
Yes. Kind of interesting, though. I mean, you and I were catching up a little bit just beforehand, and it turns out for a long weekend, at least here in the U.S., like you said, quite a bit of news over the last week. It seems like quite a few updates and excitement.
So you are saying I should share your screen? That's what you really mean?
I think you know me pretty well. Yes, that is what I mean. So I've got a few things that I came across that were either little bits of news or announcements, some updates here and there. First one I wanted to share is Windows Autopatch is celebrating its 1-year anniversary of general availability. So there were a couple of things within this announcement post that I wanted to point out. A few features that we've talked about here on Office Hours that are going GA later this month. Autopatch groups, custom deployment rings, and custom policy naming, which are currently in preview and will be going to GA. And a few more things that were just sort of announcements as in addition to that. Feature updates from Windows 10 to Windows 11. I know that has been a common shortcoming that I've heard of Autopatch or with Autopatch over the last several months is upgrading from Windows 10 to Windows 11. That is going to be GA finally at the end of the month as well. There's some other small updates, and then, of course, the big excitement that we've been talking about over the last many weeks, and I know you've got some more information on this later, Johan, but drivers and firmware integration will be part of Autopatch as well coming up. And it sounds like, based on this part of the post here, is that Autopatch is still going to allow for some more granular control over drivers, which is something that both you and I are quite a fan of. So I was happy to see that they're actually putting that in Autopatch rather than just saying, yep, we're going to automatically approve all of your drivers for you. We talked a little bit last week about the Intune remediations, the on-demand remediations that came out. There was some conversation surrounding the potential for additional licensing. And Nikolai had a Twitter post the following day or maybe the day after that the documentation had been updated to say that there was no additional license required. Based on what we were seeing last week, I think that that's still for now. But for now, the documentation does in fact say no additional license required, which is awesome.
That is quite shiny. I saw some tweets from folks not being able to run it on co-managed devices. I saw that showing up, or basically not being highlighted in the remediations option, but people were able to do it through Graph. So I'm assuming that's just the UI update that is needed.
Yeah, that's my hope as well. I think I did see a follow-up post from somebody at Microsoft that said that was not an expected an expected behavior, so they were looking into that. So hopefully that does get fixed soon.
A sub feature to the new feature. That is awesome.
Yes, exactly. All right, M365 maps. We've talked about M365 maps a few times on here. Let's see. Oh, there you go. Updated right in the background. So M365 Maps, very useful website put on by Aaron Dinage, supported by Aaron Dinage. Really helps when you're trying to navigate the landscape that is Microsoft licensing, especially in the Microsoft 365, Azure, AD, Defender, Identity, all of those licenses. This website is critical for helping me understand what is out there and what's available in all the various suites, especially now that we're having to navigate add-on licenses and things like that. I love this. This
Yeah, it's downright fantastic. Aaron does I mean, he works for Microsoft, but this is not like an official resource, but heck, it's good. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And he made quite a few updates here in June that I saw get released last week. Couple more quick things. Ben Whitmore updated his Reset-Appx PowerShell script that helps deploy the new version of Microsoft Store apps assigned through Intune. So we've talked about this a little bit. If you had legacy apps assigned in one context and then assigned the new app in a different context, you could encounter some errors. So Ben did a pretty sizable update to this script the other day. Wanted to point that out.
Yeah, so basically apps deployed to user, and now you want to deploy to the system, and here we are.
The system does not like that, it turns out.
Not very much, no.
In the same vein of updating PowerShell scripts, Trevor Jones updated his Delete-DeviceRecords PowerShell script to use the new MS Graph PowerShell module. Great script that will help you delete device objects from AD, Azure AD, Intune, Autopilot, ConfigMgr. Really great if you're testing or just need to nuke a device from several different places. And then Damien posted a little blog post on how to run on-demand remediation scripts against specific devices using Graph. So we're big fans of using Graph here, and so another way to leverage that API is pretty exciting. Last but not least, one thing that we're going to be paying attention to here moving forward, a new upcoming change that is in development for Intune that I wanted to point out is that the default settings when creating a new PowerShell script in Intune, currently when you create a new script, it will run in the system context, and some point here in the future it is going to change to the user context. So we're going to keep an eye out for that and try to announce any updates that come on that feature.
Sounds awesome, and I really like Damien's post there. Just to go back to that one for a second, what's a better way to run a PowerShell script than through another PowerShell script?
That's right. It's fantastic.
That's how we do it. Anyhow, a shout out to Dean Ellerby and David Segura that seem lurking here in the chat channel. Hi guys, good to see you again.
Hey,
and I spent some time on the driver thing that you mentioned. So let's move ahead and steal your screen for a second.
Sounds good. It was pretty fun to watch everybody celebrate this feature hitting their tenant over the last week.
Yes, very much so. Quite fond of it. So that kind of looks like my screen. All right.
Yes, it does.
Yes, Intune. Here we are. That is not my Intune tenant account. I clicked a little bit too quick on that one.
You gotta love juggling multiple tenants.
Not too many of them, luckily. I have 3 accounts to click, and I clicked the wrong one. Okay,
That'll happen.
Yeah, happens to the best of us. So in the devices node, this is where we have the driver updates for Windows 10 and later edition that was highlighted just the last week here, at least in my tenant, and I think pretty much everywhere at this point in time. But this is where you can head and create your profiles. I, as always, prefer to do them by model. Others prefer them to just put everything in a giant pile of drivers and hope for the best. I don't play in that school. I follow those ideas, but heck, whatever works for you. I'm not going to judge much. This is how I recommend doing it. And as part of this, I will add in the devices, of course, that belongs to one of these. And in my tenant, I decided to do that through groups. Well, that's the only way to assign things in Intune, but a dynamic group to be more specific. So I created a group that I based on the same name as the policy. And if you take a look in that group, you can see that it's simply a dynamic group that has a query or a dynamic query for that specific model. So fairly straightforward, 1 group per model, 1 policy per model, and 1 rule per model in that group. So that's how we assign the right driver to the right policy. And that means that if I go back here to my device drivers, it took a good day to get the drivers in there after creating the policies. I learned that the old policies that I had created previously through PowerShell before this was available, they do not show up here. So you have to recreate all of those if you're interested in that. But if I go to, for example, my latitude 3120, here are some of the device drivers that are available for approval for this particular model. The targeting is still so you have to be a little bit more specific what you pick, because obviously there are multiple components that are quite similar here. But this is a way to deal with drivers with nothing but Intune in the back end driving that configuration. And then, of course, we had the this post here. Gentleman, Sasan, that figured out that creating all of these groups and policies and rules manually is boring. So he wrote a PowerShell script for it. So long story short, this is PowerShell script that you can download. There's a GitHub link here in the bottom. It's not a super long script, but it does go ahead and create those for you. So you run the script, you go back in the console, and you have a nice, it worked a little bit different than I did here for my drivers, but it will help you create this and all the groups that are needed, etc. So quite elegant. So thank you for doing that. And thank you, Jürgen, for hosting the blog as well. Yeah, then we had this nice announcement coming up in the next version or next service release of Intune, a simplified or simpler way to delete Autopilot devices or registrations. So you don't have to do it in multiple places. And that's, of course, a nice change. Mm-hmm. I probably will still add in controls in my sequences and whatnot to make sure that all the objects are deleted. But this should help with things as well, especially when you do lab and test and you just want to go in and delete a single device right now and make sure it's gone. So brilliant.
Very exciting. Sort of the opposite. We're excited for more control on the driver side, and I'm excited for more simplification on the management of objects side of things.
Yeah, I mean, delete is a delete, so yeah, I agree.
Exactly.
All right, let's see what questions we have coming in.
All right. Yeah, we do have one so far. I need to set up a new distribution point for ConfigMgr. Do you recommend any articles I can follow? There seem to be quite a few out there.
Not an article on top of my head, but it's pretty straightforward. So I can definitely show the general process of it. It's very easy when they are in the same domain as your rest of your stuff. It's more complicated when you have like untrusted domains and things like that, because that puts another layer of complexity to it. But for general, for remote EP, let's see what I have here that can pretend to be a remote EP. I have a feeling this file server is going to want to be a remote distribution point. That's what I heard recently. So this is just a machine running Windows Server something. ConfigMgr doesn't really care much, but the first thing that you have to do is that you have to grant the config manager site server permissions to this device, because it's the site server by default that does the installation. You can have specific admin accounts, but usually if they are in the same domain, the easiest way is simply to go ahead and say, you know what, this site server in question, CM1 is my site server, is going to be the one that is a member of the local admin group. So that's step number one. And then reboot to it, take that in effect. And then you need to add in a few components, because ConfigMgr is supposed to add all the components that are needed. Doesn't quite do that. So I usually just use a PowerShell script. I think I have it up on my GitHub somewhere. Our, we both use it. See if I have. Not on that one. I have a few different repositories. So these requirements have actually not changed in many, many years. But in order to install a DP, here, you need a few features. So I just have a one-liner that adds them all in that I need, and then reboot the server if needed. So that's something I would do first. Then on all the volumes where I definitely do not want to have a content library, I would place this magic no SMS on drive file in the root. It's an empty file. It just needs to have this name here, and that will just prevent it from creating any content there. So I would do that, those two things on whatever server I have that I want to have as my distribution point. And then I would walk over to my config manager site server, head over to sites and services, and create another site system server. I'm not going to go through the wizard, but I'm going to at least start it. Just going to pick my FSO1, my intended distribution point here. Pick the only site I have, so that's not too hard. And then no proxies ever. I do not like proxies. I spent 2 hours today troubleshooting a software update point sync for a customer, where sure enough, that was a firewall and some inspection in between that just did not make the software update point happy. But that's another story. I would pick the distribution point role, have it install these things, whatever you need. Typically, at least these should be selected. And then go through the different wizard pages here, depending on your setup, and maybe limit disk space a little bit, and pick a primary content location relative to that site, and then next finish. And that's how you set up a remote distribution point. The configuration, once it's being done, you can follow it here on the monitoring node for distribution points, and they will basically show you how you're doing. Don't be scared if you see one or more lines of red in the beginning. As long as they don't stay red here, it's for the good. There usually be at least one when you start it up the first time. Some scenarios I had to reboot it once before to trigger the setup, but most times it just leave it be for 20 minutes and come back. And then you will start to see it starting to build this folder structure here, where you have these different folders being created and the content library and whatnot. So fairly straightforward. That's a short version of setting up a distribution point. Any other questions?
Not that I'm seeing at the moment. Seems like you may have deployed a distribution point or two in your day.
Maybe. These days I'm actually working mostly with doing the exact opposite.
Yeah, I was just going to say, probably decommissioned quite a few hundred as well.
Yeah, I was on I mentioned I was up early this morning. I was helping a customer over in Europe, hence I was up so dang early. They are trying to reduce from about 120 DPs down to 20. And I think that over time we can get rid of even more. But I'll say that's a good improvement. Simplifying with peer-to-peer and some other stuff.
Oh yeah. It just makes the ConfigMgr admin's life that much easier, I think, when you're able to do that.
It's quite frankly, it's simpler to deal with 20 site systems versus over 100. Well, while we're waiting for more questions, for those that may have missed it, me and Michael Niehaus, we did our event last week for Windows 11, or our notes from the field on upgrading to Windows 11. That's a free course for the community. The recording is available. So if you want to spend an hour and a half with us, by all means, make it so. And yeah, there is that one. We haven't scheduled any more, but we will publish as time goes by. What we have published, of course, is all the Q3 courses up on the Academy, so they are now available if someone is interested in joining us for more than an hour and a half. But we cover most things on Intune, ConfigMgr, and others. The fun stuff, as we call it.
That's right.
Deployment, systems management, that's the fun stuff.
That's what gets us out of bed at 5 a.m.
Well, in this case, it was an alarm.
All right. Looks like we got another question coming in while we were chatting. Is there any way to reduce the size of the distribution point content library?
Well, yes and no. The obvious way is to delete packages and applications that are no longer in use. That's an obvious way of doing it, or at least remove them from the distribution points. So say that you have, what I have here, something probably. All right, good enough. Was any Winston? It's a classic 210. That's been a while. Ooh. Anyhow, if I don't want that to be available on the distribution point, just go ahead and add properties and content and get rid of it. And it will be removed from those distribution point. The content will be deleted, and you will claim that disk space back. So you can still keep the application on the server side in its content library on the site server, but you don't need to have it on all your DPs. Another option that has been so successful ConfigMgr actually supports data deduplication for some of the data that you have. You cannot do it for data source, but you can do it for your content library. And this feature has been available a while, as you can see here from the date of the post 9 years ago. But you can indeed put in data deduplication or content library, and it will not reduce the library per se, but it will reduce the disk space that it's using. So if you're really tight on disk space on your DPs, yeah, technically this is an option. These days, I usually just recommend to increase the disk space, because disk storage, like these days, is fairly inexpensive. And the content library volumes doesn't have to be these high-speed flash volumes like you have for the database. It can be regular, non-fancy disks, as long as it's somewhat good read performance on them. Mm-hmm. But I mean, DeDuplication does what it's supposed to. We use it to make sure we can store more content than we have size on disk. The only challenge with data deduplication, it kind of lies to you, because there is a hidden volume here with a lot of chunks that you don't see in the interface here. And so should you stumble across troubles and data gets corrupted, yeah, then your content library is not too happy. So I hope that was answering to that question. Try it at least. A for effort.
That's right. And a bit of a sidebar, but to your point, I think it was Monday, or to your point about cheap storage, I think it was Monday I sent you a link that the Samsung 980 Pro NVMe drives were down to $100 for 2 terabytes. Did that make me happy?
Yeah. I remember paying close to $500 for them when they came, or
yeah,
$400 at least. Yeah.
And even I think the 1 terabyte ones were down to $60. Not too shabby.
That's okay. It's basically a nice dinner or an SSD.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, I hear some severe thunderstorms going on right now. So if I get disconnected, that's probably why.
All right.
We'll see.
Well, hopefully not.
Yeah. Well, I have 4 UPSs in there. I will take care of the machines for a little bit, but not more than like 10 minutes, because that's usually what I need to turn them off.
Oh, your audio's cracking up a little bit.
All right, I figured as much. I still have internet, but all right. Thunder it is.
All right. Oh, now you're back.
Famous thunderstorms in Chicago.
Yes.
All right. I have another question coming in from Siva. Can I set up a DP in my main office to have it replicate content and then ship it away? Absolutely. That's very doable. Just make sure that you change the boundaries after the fact and put it in the right boundary group, because it will get a new IP address eventually. Unless you have one of those really fancy WAN where you can like stretch a VLAN over multiple locations, which also can be interesting. In fact, I was working with one customer last week where they were using those new technologies, or fairly new technologies, but it turned out that when we were copying data from where we thought was like from here to here, it actually ran robin to a different site somewhere else before it came down to the third site. So it actually took longer. So, but for normal networks, normal routing, absolutely, you can set up your DP close to the site server, replicate the content, and when that is done, you can ship it off to a different location. Other options that ConfigMgr has, you can generate media. So basically a big USB stick or a USB drive, have them put the content on that, called pre-caching content or pre-staging content. You send that media over where the DP is or intended DP is, and then you can preload it in from the media.
Very cool options. All right. I had a couple more questions that came in. Why do you not prefer SCCM backup and using an external vendor?
Well, I agree on half of that sentence. I do not use the SCCM built-in backup because I think it's stupid. But I wouldn't say it's an external vendor. I still use Microsoft to do the backup, but I use the SQL backup to do it. I can explain a little bit. My screen still sharing.
Yep.
This one here. I recommend to do this with this one. Do not use. If this one is done, first of all, it doesn't compress the database, meaning if you have a 200 gig database, congratulations, every ConfigMgr backup is going to be 200 gig. Whereas if you had enabled compression on it, it would be like 30.
We're losing your audio.
Dang it. Dang thunder.
Oh, now it's back.
Telling you, thunderstorms are not good for internet with microwave links.
It started right as you were saying it doesn't compress the database.
It does not compress the database. If you have a 200 gig database, it will be a 200 gig backup, and then you may have a few days of those, and now you suddenly have a terabyte of backups. Whereas if you have compression enabled, it's 30 gigs, give or take, or a very small size. Plus, it stops the service when it's running. I don't like that either. So if you're actually distributing content, like a 10 gig WIM file, and you have a backup for 11 p.m., it will kill that transfer. I will try to do it afterwards later, 10, 15 minutes later. But if you instead use a native SQL backup, problem solved. Compression on. Bit of cleanup. I added it in a PowerShell script that also backs up the cd.latest folder, because without that one, you cannot really restore the server. Useful to have it. But this is way better, I think. To do a SQL maintenance plan than using the native backup.
Yep, agreed.
Yep. All right.
When dealing with OS registry customizations, do you prefer to use group policy, registry keys, packages, or apply registry add in task sequence? Curious how other people deal with hundreds of customizations. We use all of these, and it can be a nightmare tracking down where a setting has been applied at times, especially when there are registry files used. Sometimes contain dozens of settings. There's a question coming in from YouTube, by the way.
When I need to create something new, I have a tendency to do that through PowerShell scripts only, because they will allow me to do some additional logging, etc., as part of that process. For example, I was playing around with, I was doing some mass deployments recently of Windows 11, and I needed to make my sequence to be somewhat quiet and do a lot of configurations. Let's see what I did. Maybe these guys. I'm smacking in a bunch of register keys. So I just added a PowerShell script for that. And if you want some logging, you can add a start and stop transcript to the easy one, or import a logging module, something like that. So PowerShell script, when you have the chance, I'll say is the better option because it does allow you to do logging when needed and whatnot. But yeah,
All right.
take on that.
Cool. Ryan mentioned in the chat here, for the record, your audio had no issues. Hear you loud and clear. So maybe it was just on my side. Coincidental. Because obviously it's, well, I don't hear it, but it's likely storming here as well.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for the update.
All right. And then a couple of comments about one of our favorite topics, conferences. Siva mentioned here in the chat, asked his boss to attend one of the MMS, at least in Miami. So hopefully that gets approved. And Matt asked a question: are there any noteworthy conferences in Europe focused on ConfigMgr and Intune, and would you recommend attending them?
The Workplace Ninja does it, I know. It's a new conference. I obviously haven't been to any since it's a fresh one, but the MEM LinkedIn group, they are running I wonder if it was this week. I saw something about it. It was in Paris. I think Sune presented there and a few others. I'm still trying to learn the new TweetDeck interface. It more or less destroyed all my customizations.
Oh no.
At least I was able to import all my columns, but that was no fun.
Oh wow, I heard that.
Yeah, this is a big one. Looking for that link. Soon, at least. MEM Summit, I call it.
September?
Oh, that wasn't even close. Let me bring up the link there.
There you go.
So this one is very likely to be good. I haven't been there, but I recognize a lot of the speakers here. So, for example, Damien that we talked about earlier, or showed a case for, that's a great speaker. Matthias is a great speaker. Peter is a great speaker. Haven't heard Niklas present, but I know he knows his stuff. So, yeah, that seems like a good one. And then, of course, the Workplace in India that we probably have a link to somewhere also.
Mm-hmm.
I found that one. That one is also in September in Switzerland, I think. Yeah, Baden, Switzerland. Yeah, that one I have to been to, but it's been a few years. And this little dog here does not like thunder.
Oh no.
Yeah, he usually crawls under my desk.
Poor guy.
Which my size can fit the poodle.
Yep.
There we go. And he's not the poodle.
No, he is not. More closer to one of the horses that are out back, I think.
Yeah. So I'll have to scoot back a little bit here.
Yep. I was just going back to the Workplace Ninjas comment. Tons of speakers that I'm seeing pop up there as well. Even David that joined us earlier, I think he's speaking there. And I saw Niehaus and Jurgen and tons of people there. Excited to hear how both of those conferences go.
Yep. Apparently, I lost access to my desk. It's for a good cause.
As long as he doesn't hit that power button.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, yeah. David said in the chat, yes, David is speaking.
Hey, there you go.
Congrats. That should be a nice little trip.
Yeah, I mean, Switzerland, that's not only good conferences, but chocolate. My goodness, they're good.
Yeah.
Beer is not bad either. But there is a street that goes just from the train station, Bahnhofstrasse. Bahnhof means train-ish. There are like chocolate stores like lined up on the side of it. You can buy chocolate, not like in a packet, but basically by the pound, and you get like from a big plate, they carve you off blocks that you can bring home. Very good.
That sounds fantastic.
Yep. And they're good on ice cream also. Sidebar. But any other questions out there? It's a long answer to a short question.
No new questions at the moment. Yeah, Matt said thank you. You're welcome. Ross, you're welcome as well. Glad that helped.
Well, I cannot say I'm a biggest fan of power outages and thunder and whatnot, but it's good to get some rain in this part of the Midwest.
We needed it
for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Nice to see the yard change from brown to green over the last week.
Yep.
Or mostly nice. Green.
Yeah, grass is remarkably resilient. Goes dormant and then just kidding. Here we are. All right. Any other questions out there? All right. I do not see any other questions at the moment. There came one. Is there a discount for MMS event in Miami? I don't think so. I think the early bird stopped at some point back. They usually have, like, if you register early, you get a better deal of the package when you get like a hotel and event in one deal. Mm-hmm. But I'm pretty sure those
the only one I'm seeing right now, at least still advertised on the page, is that the education discount still seems to exist.
Yeah, $500 education discount. Mm-hmm. That is correct. So they have a bundle. It's about $3,100 for the conference and the 4-night hotel. So, but hey, MMS is great. Absolutely great. All right, then. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you for all the good questions. And thank you, Andrew, for supporting our little event here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I hope your power stays on and you stay dry the rest of the day. And thank you, everybody, for joining us.
All right. Sounds good. Bye, everyone.
Have a great one.